We are live.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are live. Welcome to First Fridays. And today's topic we are talking about how pursuing educate higher education impacts couples and relationships. And we have with us Laura, who is in her you going into your fourth year, right?
I am
You're her fourth year at William James College.
finally here.
It's here. It's So, Laura, introduce yourself, and then tell us a little bit about why you wanted to have this conversation about this topic, and then we'll dive in. We'll start talking about
So, my name is Laura Smith. I am in my last year of my doctorate program at William James College. I am currently a therapeutic clinician for BPS. And I chose this topic because I was having conversations with multiple friends and family members who some were married, some were not, some in relationships. And as one partner chose out to gain higher education or education period for growth, the what seemed to happen was relationships seemed to branch off from one another, um,
it.
where one couple became angry, mean, language became condescending, towards the and hurtful towards the other one. And so I wanted to like reach out, speak to people who might be experiencing, who might not be experiencing. But my goal was to speak to couples who have been able to manage and keep their relationship strong while while one or both were going through higher education.
I love that. I think the topic in itself, I don't think we always think about, I think we just pick. Sometimes people have conversations about going back to school. Other people like, I'm just going back to school and then come home, tell the spouse. Some people are single, but it may affect their children. And so I know we're specifically talking about couples today, but I think that this is a topic that we don't often talk about enough. And so I'm
Mhm.
excited that you even brought this to talk
Oh,
about because it's like because even as you've been talking to people about it over these last couple of months, people have stories and people have situations and people like this is my first year and this is a great thing to talk about because we've been struggling
mhm,
because
mhm.
it takes you away from the norm of what people are expecting you to show up as before you went to school. And so listen, I love it. We're going to be talking about over the rest of July.
Yes.
Laura's interviewing some couples about it. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into what are some practical things that you can do before you decide to go to school, while
Mhm.
you're in the program, and it could be any level of education that you're in. So, you ready to dive into the conversation?
I'm ready.
All right. So tell me a little bit about your experience. I know we had talked a little bit about your experience yourself because I believe, we talk from the things that we've experienced so that we can help others. So tell me a
Correct.
little bit about your experience in this topic.
So another great reason was because I've shared with you, Dr. Lavanya, was in private was I remember dating a guy and he thought like I spent so much time in my education, and this is when I was doing my second master's degree, that I didn't have time for him. And I was like, yes, but you have to understand what the focus is. And if you're thinking long term, I'm thinking long term. You know, I don't want to ask somebody um, years, you know, down the line, like, hey, can I help you? Hey, can I bag that for you? So if I have the chance, the opportunities to make it greater for me, it's not just me, it's both of us. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember where there were language coming out like, eventually, oh, you think you're all that. And I'm like, well, explain that. What does that mean? Or you think you're better. And I was like, so explain that. What does that mean? And years later, he then apologized. He came back and apologized and said, I didn't understand. But
Mm-hmm.
if he was able to communicate that with me, we could have had a communication about what it would have looked like or what it was looking like then. And today I'm in a stronger, healthier relationship where he's more supportive, and he understands. And we're kind of, on the same track of I understand when he has to study and he understands when I have to study. But we also have a great relationship because we know how me, I've learned how to communicate things, and he
Mhm.
also does. So I thought, like, if I was able to get through this, and what it was that held back prior, how could I help other people, or could I help other people? Because I think education is great, and I think that a lot of us um,
Mhm.
want it. We're just afraid to take that step forward. And if we have the person that we're with to support us, it would we would some of a lot of us would live out our dreams.
Mhm. You mentioned communication um, earlier when you were describing if he was able to communicate differently, and I think we use the word communication so loosely, right? We just got to communicate better.
Mm-hmm.
But some people communicate well. Some people express their feelings verbally. Some people can write their feelings down. Some people don't even know what they feeling until they feel it, and they're like, I don't even know what this is. And so when we talk about communication, um, are we talking about communication before we even get into the program? When we're thinking about the program, are we bringing them into the decision making of whether or not we go to school? Like, when do we start the communication about the dreams and aspirations that we have? When do we start that?
So I always believe like communication starts right from the beginning, but it's also learning to know one another. So the first
Mm,
thing that I've done in my it's new, but it's in my relationship was, and I remember he actually brought it to me was um, the four love language. Like, which one is your love
mhm,
language? Oh wow, this is how he communicates. This is how I communicate. So like learning one another. So even if it's nonverbal, how do we respond? Right? What is it that we are seeking for in life? Where's my path going? Where's your path going? What direction are you driving to?
mhm,
And so once I've learned that, I begin to, because I love to read. I start introducing him to what I like, and then I had to learn what he liked. And so in the communication, it was, where are you now? Where are you going? What are your 5 year? What's your plan in 5 years?
mhm,
We can say two right now, but let's make it five. And
mhm,
am I included? And if I am, how much? Uh,
mhm,
so so we talked about that, and like, and also com- communication in the 5 year, we also have to start including income, right? So
mhm,
what's my salary looking like? What's your salary looking like? And if one wants to go to school, what's the finance cost and where is it coming from? What bank?
mhm. You done said some good stuff right there. Okay, let's let's do one thing at a time. Okay.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
talked about the love languages, the five love languages.
Mhm.
Love that because everybody is different, right?
Mm.
And so if you can date people in higher education and have two different totally experiences based off of what the needs of that person is, right? Because
Mhm.
everybody is different. So getting to know your partner, love that. That's a great point that you made. But that takes time, right? It takes time, it takes energy, it takes intentionality. You can't get to know your partner unless you're intentional about having those conversations, which is completely separate from the higher education conversations because it's about getting to know that person, and that
Mhm.
person wants more knowledge in a specific area for a specific person purpose, but it's getting to know who it is that you're in
And
that
you just
relationship.
said something, Dr. Lavanya. You said getting to know that person, but is that the person that you want? What do you want with this person? So first of all, you have to get to know the person, but you have to get to know thyself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you have to know who you are. What are your behaviors? Are you watching his behaviors or her behaviors? What are you paying attention to? But do you know you? What are
Mm-hmm.
you bringing in? Because what we've learned in life in these days, because so much has been shared, is there's this thing called generational trauma.
Mm.
What are you bringing? What are you carrying? What are you hiding? Right? So we have to get to know ourselves and be willing to expose us to them.
Mm.
Right?
Say more about that. When you say expose us to them, what does that mean?
If this is your person, you have to be open. You have to know that what is it that what triggers does this person have? Do they have any, right?
Mhm.
Are you willing to be a participant in what traumas they now have or they're carrying with them? And how well do you know yourself to heal, help them heal while
Mm,
you're either healed or healing? How do you, how, like, what's your language of communication? How do you communicate,
mhm,
right? What's your peace? Are you
mhm,
bringing peace or are you bringing more drama to this person?
mhm, mhm.
Because even if you have the higher education, there's still setbacks. How do you heal with your setbacks? How do you deal with them? Is it possible? What do you want to bring?
Yeah. So it's not only knowing the other person, but also knowing yourself
Have to
and
know
knowing
about.
the value that you bring to the relationship, also the value that they bring to the
Correct.
relationship,
Correct.
and then how the education that you're getting plays into, like you had mentioned, the long-term goals of that relationship.
Mhm. Because in a program they teach you about leadership, right? What are you
Mm-hmm.
what are you leading? Who are you leading? If
Mm-hmm.
you don't heal you, you can't lead someone else,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we have to learn to take care of, it's like feeding your body junk or feeding your body nourishment. How do you
Mm-hmm.
want to grow? And so what I've learned in my growth, in my healing process of healing me before allowing someone else to come into my path, I had to make sure I was okay
Mm-hmm.
so that I would be able to now communicate verbally and not just through actions. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe the touch of the body, right? That's a trigger for me,
Mm-hmm.
right? But he doesn't know that. So
Right.
how am I able to communicate that? I'm sorry, did something happen?
Mm.
What I've learned is it okay if I touch you? Is it okay if we talk about this?
Mm.
Can I explain this to you with understanding? Because
Mm-hmm.
if I can't understand it, I can't share it.
Mm-hmm.
And so going into higher education with a partner is is extremely important to have those conversations. Here's my finances. This is what my plan is going to be. And if we're planning on doing this a long time or a lifetime, I need you to understand that even though I make this amount of money, 30 grand is going to go here a year. Are you willing to support the weight? Because now it's weight.
Mm-hmm.
And if so, how? Because I don't want it to be heavy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we can now transition into finances, because I think that's also a great point. Which a lot of times finances, even outside of paying for higher education, is a lot of conflict in the relationships because of
Mhm.
finances. And higher education is not cheap. Okay, it's just not. I don't care where you go. It's
No.
just not cheap. And so, a lot of people are trying to get out of debt.
Mm-hmm.
Think about higher education, you either think about we got to pay out of this out of pocket for right now, or we about to go into more debt. Especially
Mm-hmm.
if like you said, we're doing this for a short time or a long time. So if we're doing this long term, we're talking about marriage. Now that's our debt that
Mm-hmm.
we're going into.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so what's your thoughts on that? On communicating on whether we're paying out of pocket, student loans. How do you go into that conversation if you're so passionate about going to school, but the spouse is passionate about getting out of debt, and so you're not on the same page, right? Because it's not always peaches and cream. Even if you communicate, you do all the things, we can lay out a whole plan for how you talk about it, and you're still on separate paths. Then what?
You have to be conscious and respectful for your partner. So then you have to figure out what you're going to do so that you don't bring that debt. Because I heard you say just a second ago, it's our debt.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm one of those where I'm like, no, that's your debt. I have to
Mm-hmm.
be honest. Is that fair though? Right? Because when you're including someone into your life or someone is including you into their life, it does become one.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have to sit down and think of ways to get out of it so it doesn't become a our debt,
Mm-hmm.
but a paid debt.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be our debt. I want it to be a, a way, a paid debt. So then what is it that I can do? Because if I'm in higher education or higher learning, then what I want is a way to make it work for me.
Mm-hmm.
So what else can I do to make it work for me so that there isn't high debt? Oh, I can write a scholarship letter. Babe, I need help. I need this to make sense because this is how I'm seeing it. So start including the partner in so that they know, he or she knows that, you know what, this might be, you know, less of our debt, but our growth. So I need to write a letter for a scholarship. Let's write that letter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, so we think about ways to and sometimes we can foresee it and sometimes we can't, right? Think
Mm-hmm.
about ways so that the debt isn't so high.
Mm-hmm. I think you made a good point because I said our debt. You was like, "No, that's your debt," um, or is it our debt? And I think that also goes back to the values in a relationship,
Hmm.
right? Because some people keep their money separate, and so it's like, okay, you want to go back to college, go be great. That's
Hmm.
gonna be on your debt. That's gonna be your credit. You figure out how to pay it. I'm not interested, and then that works for them. And then some people are like, we have one bank account, um, and all the money comes in and goes out from this one bank account. And so even how that particular conversation would go will go differently based off of how that couple handles their finances.
Well, not only that, yeah, that's correct, Dr. Lavanya. But my thing is, if it's your bank account, my bank account, right, and it's your debt, not my debt, am I going to watch you suffer because
You
you
know,
want
some people might say yes, right? Because we're not talking about. I don't think we were not talking about couples that are all healthy, or and that healthy means multiple different things. But somebody may say, "Listen, girl, go be great. I'm going to support you. Go get them student loans. Go do spend whatever money you got to pay." Because even for us, we have to. For the school we're in, we have to go to residency, so we have to pay for hotels. We have to pay for food. We have to do these things to support the education throughout the years. So somebody might say, "No, that's yours. I'm not mad
to.
at you, but it's yours."
So then what happens in the long run? So now I'm a doctor. I'm getting millions of dollars just to like speak or lead, do a consulting firm or some kind of leadership role. Do I now exclude him? Like, so those are conversations, and that's what I'm saying is learning the ways to communicate with understanding
Mm-hmm.
so that we can all be on the same stream.
Mm-hmm.
And the financial burden isn't a life burden.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe like higher education is great.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and if you have a partner to do it with, it can be healthy. We just have to learn one another.
Yeah, I agree with you. Um, in one of the interviews that we did, we had talked about um, mutual mutual growth, like personal growth, personal development.
Hmm.
Um, and you had made a comment in the beginning of how, in one of the relationships that you were in, he had mentioned you think you're better
Hmm.
than me. And right, so how do you think that plays a role in the support of the other person, going back to school, if because they could be on a path to doing something else that's develop developing them. But how do you think that plays a role in mutual growth together?
First, the other person who is planning on going to school has to have strength, and whatever or whomever their faith base is, they have to be able to say, you know what, I need this support mentally, emotionally, um, because if they're not strong, the words can break them down,
Mm,
and they might not want to fulfill their dreams. And if they're strong enough, they can either have the communication with that person, or they can know right from then and there, like, well, maybe this person isn't for me because this is what I've experienced in life. And so I don't want to be at the lower totem pole. So
mm,
it's again having that conversation. We've sat down, we communicated, this is what happened. I don't want to be here. I don't want to make lesser dollars. I want to make more because the economy is growing, right?
mm-hmm,
So I don't want to be stuck. I think that the other person, to me, you really have to know who you're dealing with. And in a conversation, what I could have done was say, hey, what are your insecurities about me
Mm-mm.
being in a
That's
higher
good.
education?
That's good. That's
But
good.
in my selfish state, I just was like, you know what? You don't see what I see. Let me move this away from me. Yet, and so the word toxic came out. You're
Mm-mm.
toxic for my growth. When I
Mm.
could have said, you know what? What are your insecurities? What are you afraid of?
Do you think that that would have been a better, because insecurities and fear and being afraid could also be words that are triggering, right? Because people are like, I'm not insecure. I'm not afraid of nothing. Um,
But your actions are,
true, true.
because actions are loud.
But the word, I think sometimes the words that we say make people defensive
Hmm.
too, even though that's not our intent. But if someone was like, "Wait, why are you so insecure about A, B, C, and D?" I might be like, "What?" So what's a
But
uh,
maybe it is insecurity we just never looked at.
true? But I'm saying, how can we say it differently?
Um,
I'm just thinking like how we could, and I think this is for me too, because I'm a very direct person. I'm direct. I don't, I do a lot, so I don't have
mhm.
a whole bunch of time for cut cards and
Yes, yes.
code, right? And so, somebody said one time I said something, this is a little off topic, but somebody was like, "Do you miss me?" And I was like, "No, no, I
Hmm.
don't." Because there's nothing about you that's missable.
Hmm.
And I tolerate you when you're around. And I didn't say that, but I said I don't miss you. You probably should ask questions that you don't want to answer to the truth to, because no. And so, like, you're so mean. I said, no, I'm honest. And
Right.
so sometimes our honesty still is offensive, especially if we're in a place or relationship that we want them to understand our point, or we want to be able to have good dialogue. So even finding the words that are not offensive, while it may be true, you may be insecure, you may be afraid, you may be that feel failure, right? But how do I say it in a way? Because I think when we're talking about how to engage our partner, I think how we say things
Hmm.
is equally as important as just the purposeful communication.
I think it's as adults we have to learn how to stop coddling
Mm.
those that are around us. So when I hear people say I am direct, right? Why can't we be right? And
They can't
so
handle it. I feel like we need to have a whole. I think this we need a part two. I think we need a part two because, and we need a male perspective, right?
I
Because I, I I agree with you, but somebody else might completely disagree with both of us because the word even coddling, they'd be like, no, you just are communicating in a way that is receptive to the person you're talking to.
but that's why we have to know who we're dealing with too, right? So now we know triggers. Is it the words?
Hmm.
The touch?
That's
Is
good.
it the
Yeah.
expression? Right?
Hmm.
So we have to know who our audience is when we're working with them. And when I say working is relationships are work. You might not get paid the same, but it's work. And so we have to learn how to balance us, the person, and the relationship.
Hmm. Hmm. I want to rewind just a little bit because sometimes we get into these relationships and we talk about being equally yoked sometimes,
Hmm.
um, and you might get into a relationship and y'all both were working, you're good, and
Hmm.
then you want more, and the more is going back to school. And one of the either the man or the woman's like, we've been doing good for 10 years. Why you trying to mess this up? Right. And so is there conversations that you should have on the onset? Because I think sometimes you go into a relationship and you may not know or you may know, but there are people that are go-getters. There are people that, you know, want to consistently learn, lifetime learners. It don't always have to be in a school setting, but you're always wanting to know more, learn more. If there's something that you don't know, you want to learn how to do it better. So you get a certification or right.
Lavanya, I feel like we always know though. We
Mm,
always know. So that's where the honesty comes out. We always know.
And we just choose to just be in a relationship, even though we know you're not trying to personally grow. You're not trying to do more with yourself, and we just do it anyway.
I do. I believe so.
That's interesting. So then it's almost like it's our fault that we are decided to be in a relationship with someone that we knew is not interested in growth. How do we manage that?
I think we manage it again by conversation, being honest, and not just, you have to be honest with yourself though, because you don't just pop up one day and say, hey, I want to go to college. You've had this on your thought, and you have to know who you're dealing with, right? So is he or she the one for me? Like, watch the movement, and then you'll know if it's long term or if it's part time.
Mm, I think you're right. I think you're right. But I don't have as much insight as you do on it, because both times when I went back to get my master's and my doctorate, I was single, and so I had a thought, and the next day I applied, and like a couple weeks later I was in the program. So a lot for me, because I'm spontaneous and a little what's that word? I have a thought and I do it. I don't know how well that's gonna work out in marriage or relationships, but I think that
I come down.
knowing your partner and knowing how they show up is important. So,
Hmm. And how
so
you show up.
hmm
So we can't put everything off on them. How you
that's true.
show up.
That's true. So
Um,
if we got about 4 more minutes left, and so I always like to have takeaways for the people that they can actually, some practical application things that they could do, whether it's with their spouse, whether they're thinking about going back to school. Um, we talked about finances. We talked about mutual growth. We talked about being able to balance. We didn't go too much into the balance, but being able to balance what you're doing and the new roles as a student. So, what are some practical things that we can give people as they are on their journey to higher education, thinking about it? What are some tangible things that we think that they
so
can?
one thing that I want to share is I remember during one of the interviews with the one couple, and one thing that one of the women said, um, Miss Bonds, was know your partner,
Mm-hmm,
know your person. Those are her words. Know your person. And once you know your person, you will know how to communicate. Once you know your person, you would know how to help heal
mm-hmm,
and soothe without feeling like you're that parent.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
You don't have to coddle the relationship. You don't have to coddle that person. You don't have to diminish you to make them feel comfortable.
mm-hmm,
If you're here to shine, shine.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like it. So step one is to shine.
Shine, shine.
Step one is to shine.
Right.
And what's the next one? What else? What else can they do?
So the next one would be is to know thyself while you're shining and be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Set no limits on your growth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so shine, know thyself. Anything else you want to tell the people?
Believe in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and then accept your gift. And your gift is your person.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I love that. And we need to know it's our person from the beginning, right? Because
Well, and then that's where the conversation comes in,
yeah.
right? So you can't just like jump into something and say, oh, he or she is handsome, and this is a beautiful, and this is what we're gonna do. It's more than that. It's more than the exterior. What's going
Mm-hmm.
on in the inside? So when someone says to you, I'm an introvert by nature, figure that out. I'm an extrovert by nature. Figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? So, and that's always my thing is what happened to you? How did you get here? What are you afraid of? What are you running from?
Mm-hmm.
What are your fears? My
Mhm.
first thing I asked my partner was, "What are your fears?"
Mhm.
And people said, "Why was that your first question?" Because that's what we need to heal. Because I
Mhm.
don't want to bring in what you left.
Mhm. That's good. That's good. Well, Laura, thank you for joining us today. This is a great conversation. I feel like we touched on a couple different things. And this conversation could go so many different directions, especially when we're talking about relationships. But things that I took away is communication, um, letting your light shine, and being with someone that helps you, that encourages you to shine, and not places like not trying to impress you, right?
Mhm.
Someone that's encouraging you to be great, that can create those spaces for you to be great. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing your story and the experiences that you've had. And I look forward to the rest of this month. And as we have more conversations with more couples and more um, people, hope we might be just bouncing to some people on the street talking about this topic. So, so this
Thank
was good. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back next month.